All right, greetings and welcome to the Dr. J Vlog series. It's Thursday, April 10th, 2025, and on Thursdays we tackle knowledge and science. I'm going to start out west today. Washington State University offers the Honeybees and Pollinators program. Real program. It's the cornerstone of their College of Agricultural, Human, and Natural Resource Sciences program. And so the Pollinators program itself is designed to foster resilient ecosystems in the Washington State area and beyond. And some of their entomologists have been studying the U.S. commercial beekeepers industry and found that they've lost over 60% of their colonies in the past year. And that's following a survey that revealed beekeepers lost 55% of their colonies the preceding year. And that's the highest death rate that's been recorded since they started tracking this systematically in 2011. Commercial beekeepers reported that on average they lost 62% of their colonies from June 2024 through February 2025. That's according to a national survey by Project Apis M. The organization gathered data from over 700 beekeepers nationwide, first couple of months of 2025. And those operations of those 700 plus beekeepers accounted for more than half of all of the colonies that are managed in the United States. So this is quite a significant loss. And similarly, in Canada, beekeepers have lost a record number of hives the last couple of years as well. On average, they've come in at about 35% over the last several years. But in 2024 specifically, 3 in 5 respondents to a survey reported losses of more than 20% of their hives. Honey production on the whole fell by 18% from the preceding year to about 78 million pounds in 2024, and that's the largest drop since 2007. Paul Kelly, a research and apiary manager at the University of Guelph's Honeybees Research Center, estimates that the total value of honeybees to the Canadian economy is about $70 billion annually. And that includes the honeybee pollination benefits, the actual production of honey itself, as well as the income the farmers earn who depend upon these bees. The spike in bee population losses expectedly has raised some concerns amongst beekeepers about the future of the industry. Since 2007, scientists have been tracking what they call colony collapse disorder. CCD, colony collapse disorder, refers to a syndrome defined as a dead colony with no adult bees and with no dead bee bodies, but with a live queen and usually honey and immature bees still present. These figures fluctuate annually, but CCD has spiked over the last couple of years in North America. No scientific cause for CCD has been determined, nothing definitive. But whatever the underlying cause, the evidence indicates that honeybee farmers in Ontario and across Canada, for that matter, have lost over a third of their colonies over the last 13 winters. So this is a significant problem, not just for the bees themselves, obviously, but Dr. Juliana Rangel of Texas A&M University explains accordingly. It impacts everyone's food security. Fruits and vegetables are pollinated by bees, and we love our fruits and vegetables. We love our coffee, which is pollinated by bees. We may often take this for granted, but this should be a major concern for all of us. Okay? So, the most perplexing issue of all, though, is that no one's exactly sure why this is happening. There are several possible factors. One would be a poor food supply for the bees themselves. Changing weather patterns can confuse the bees, causing them to leave their hives too early or too late and look for food that actually isn't in bloom. Rapidly changing temperatures, even over a few weeks, can be extremely bad news for a colony. The bees think, oh, it's warm enough. I'm going to go out and look for food, Rangel would say. But there's actually no food. She goes on, then they would come back and they spent a lot of time, or they spent a lot of the reserves they had, but they didn't bring any food back. And if they're on the verge of running out of reserves, which is honey, then they can die further, end quote. So that's one possibility. Second, pesticides might be implicated. Researchers study the impacts on colonies of pesticide poisoning, and they've been doing this for quite some time. However, if there's a particularly acute situation, studying the immediacy of the impact actually requires several months to evaluate what's going on. And yet the question would remain then, well, why should that be the case in light of the fact that pesticides have been used regularly for decades, and there have been no obvious changes in recent use patterns? And of course, the bottom line is that the livelihoods of these beekeepers depends on maintaining healthy bees. And if they haven't changed their management patterns, there's no obvious reason that pesticide use should have caused these extremely high losses in bee colonies. So again, Guelph's Honeybee Research Center program argues that there's a complex mosaic of factors that are leading to the honeybee losses. Their research seems to indicate that there's a kind of a fatal combination, a toxic admixture, if you will, of unpredictable weather patterns, which have been made worse by climate change, by pests and pathogens, and habitat loss. Unfortunately, in the United States, the recent research has been stalled in large part due to these new massive budget cuts and layoffs that have been happening across the federal government in 2025. And so, for example, the Agricultural Department, their laboratories, I should say, are often responsible for studying mass bee deaths. But DOGE has slashed billions in USDA funding and offered staff buyouts as well across the board. Future surveys that cover the transition from winter to spring could provide more accurate numbers, but unfortunately, the widespread cuts to the federal agencies happen to coincide with March and April, the two key months when the temperature fluctuations increase significantly, and one can then start to study more closely and intensively the weather impacts in terms of what happens to the bee colonies. But again, that research has effectively been eliminated, at least for the current round or for the current cycle. So it's very difficult then to study the impacts of weather and climate change and other factors. According to the experts in the field, though, there's really no need to panic just yet. For one thing, honeybee colonies grew in the United States significantly in the years leading up to 2023. There are always ups and downs in populations that are quite natural, even spanning a couple of years or longer. Usually, the populations tend to bounce back. A single year may not have much of an impact, despite dramatic losses. But 2 years in a row, of course, then starts to hint at a possible trend. And so then the problem would really, accelerate should these patterns extend over a period of several years. Why would that matter? Well, because we become quite dependent upon honeybees, which are responsible for pollinating about a third of the food supply in the United States. And the impact isn't just limited then to the United States either, or to Canada. So for example, 80% of the world's almonds are grown and pollinated in Northern California. And the beekeepers' businesses will suffer as well with layoffs and staff reductions. So there's any number of effects that could result. And most importantly, though, from a global or national standpoint at least, food security depends upon honeybees and the native pollinators. The USDA knows quite well about the nature of the unusual losses that we've seen recently in terms of honeybee colonies, and they've expressed concerns about the possible impacts on food production and supply. So, that means there's an immediate challenge then to try to understand what's happening, right? Especially to the honeybee population in general. What are the direct and indirect causes of CCD and the most recent declines that we've witnessed? Now, again, we don't have to be hopeless or helpless in this regard. We don't have to just sit on our hands and wait for the research to provide definitive results. There's two things that can actually be done immediately, both that are highly doable. So first, one can increase planting lush habitats and flowers and so forth, even in one's own yard, on a smaller scale if necessary, and that can attract and encourage the bees. Second, there are many other natural pollinators too that can be supported, right? Including butterflies and moths, flies, beetles, wasps, bats, and even some birds. So these all play crucial roles as well in transferring pollen and supporting plant reproduction. So, and as a general rule, having diverse pollinators probably would be the best long-term option rather than relying too heavily just on honeybees. So fear not, we're not on the brink of agricultural collapse, but like most complex systems in the modern world and contemporary societies, we truly do need to keep studying these complex systems. And we need to be studying, it sounds a bit trite, the birds and the bees, and the flowers and the trees, and so on, to understand the interdependencies and the dynamics that affect each part of this complex, interconnected, and dynamic system. And so, to that end, I'm also actually planning to contact Guelph's Honeybee Research Center to discuss the options for creating my own colonies or our own colonies on our own property. Why not? I'm always planting trees anyway. This is something that I love to do. I love to plant plants and trees. I've been doing it since I was a child. So why not see if I can't help out on this particular front? Right? Just trying to be part of the solution, especially after so many years of being part of the problem. And not always, I hope. Anyway, I'll let you know what happens. Stay tuned. So if you're interested, you can consider doing the same if you've got some land, or there's certainly ways that you can enhance your property to make it more attractive to bees. Again, assuming you're not afraid of them or that you're not allergic. Obviously, there are other reasons to protect yourself. But nonetheless, I'm going to give it a try. We'll see what happens. So until next time, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives, nurture love in your hearts, and dole out hugs in abundance, and be well.